Get ready to elevate your living room with a unique and rustic farmhouse coffee table made from reclaimed timbers. In this video, I'll show you how to build a stunning farmhouse coffee table using 70-year-old reclaimed timbers. Stick around to the end and see how it turns out. My name is Trevor, and welcome to the first video on Timbercraft Workshop. Let's get into it. Like any project, it starts out with a plan and laying it out on your materials. I'm using these leftover pieces of a 70-year-old glue lamp. I did design this coffee table in SketchUp first to see how much material I would need, and it's going to be close. After laying out for some rough cuts, I head over to my miter saw station and cut everything to rough length. As I'm using my last few pieces of these timbers, I don't have much wiggle room, and I have to cut everything closer to the finished length than I normally would like. Having a stop block set up on the miter saw station makes the double cutting process quick and simple, especially on multiple repeated cuts. With everything cut down to a more manageable size, I run everything over the joiner to clean up and square up two faces. Most of these timbers were fairly square already since I cleaned up the original beam on my bandsaw mill a few months ago, and it only took about 2 passes per face. Now that I have the two faces square, I run the third side through the planer so I'm able to double cut everything down about 2 inches on the table saw to avoid planing off a ton of material, and because I'm going to use these offcuts in a future project. I haven't used my table saw in a while, so I thought it'd be best to check and make sure it was last set to 90 degrees. If you ever use one of these digital angle guides, you know it always takes some time to get that last tenth of a degree. With the saw set up, I run everything through and bring it all near its final dimension. The saw does leave a decent finish when it's set up correctly, but it is nice to run the face through the planer one last time to bring everything down to the exact finished dimension. With the top pieces selected and put together, it's time to give this some shape. Like shown at the start of the video, I'm going to be giving this the same profile as my dining room table. So I'm laying out the bottom for where the legs will mount, and I'm going to give the sides a hefty taper. I'm leaving it about 1 inch thick on the edge and pulling it back close to 8 inches to form this taper, as seen in the shaded area. There are a couple different options to shape this. First off, we can make a quick sled and set the piece on a block, form the right angle, and run it through the planer, but that's a lot of material to plane off. Second, we could use a router, a saw, dado stack, step it down to the close desired angle, but this is going to leave us with a bunch of little steps to sand off at the end. The third option is to use a bandsaw or a chainsaw and just sand it and rip off the bulk of the material. This is super messy and leaves a rough cut with a lot of sanding. I may have used this method on the dining room table, but it is not recommended. But since the top isn't glued yet and I don't have a bandsaw, I'm going to set up my table saw and double cut each individual piece before assembling the top together. One final thing to note, clearly mark and label each piece where you want it to cut and what you want to cut, and really pay attention to the markings. Did I say pay attention to the markings? Now I forgot to turn off the camera, so here's how I cut it. Overall, the top profile turned out nice. The tapers came together fairly well despite some wood chips making it look otherwise. Other than the shaded offcut. Remember when I said clearly label each piece? Well, mistakes happen, and unfortunately I don't have any spare pieces to remake this, so I'm going to have to fix what was done. Super simple though. I just cut off a few kerf-wide strips from the taper offcuts and glued them in. I filled most of the cut, and I will fill the rest later on in this build. What do you all do when mistakes happen during a build? Are you able to overcome them and fix them, or do you end up remaking that part entirely? Let me know down in the comments. Now that the top is fixed, it's time to get ready for the glue up. As Mike Farrington would say, it's time for the mighty biscuit joiner. This is going to help align everything during the glue up. There is plenty of strength in the glue itself, and the top is 3 inches thick, so that's a lot of surface area for the glue. I'm laying out a generous amount of glue, but trying to minimize the squeeze out for a quick and easy cleanup process. If you have made it this far in the video, if you want to see more content like this, then please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps towards future projects. With the top set up, it's time to cut it down to final size. Now my table saw isn't wide enough to cut it to length, and my track saw can't cut 3 inches deep in a single pass. So I set up a temporary fence on the side of my table saw. Again, if the saw is set up properly, the edge should be parallel with the miter slots and the blade. So I have a board clamped to the side of my table saw, and the second board used as a temporary fence with a spacer piece to shim it out for my final cut. But it is good to just double check to make sure your measurements are right. If you're cutting large or heavy pieces on your table saw, these infeed legs are a game changer. I made mine based on the ones James Bate has on his channel, so head on over there and check out his video if you want to make a set for yourself. Now that the top is all done, I quickly cut the legs to their final size before getting started on laying out and cutting the joinery. When I'm building projects for myself, I like to try new techniques or use methods I don't regularly use. This gives me a chance to try out the new techniques and refine my skills for future products. For this, I'll be cutting the mortise and tenons to assemble the whole table. For the tenons, I'm able to cut them on my table saw using a regular blade to establish a clean shoulder, then swap over to a dado stack and remove the bulk of the material. This can be done just using a regular blade for all the cuts. Now, I should be using a spacer block off the fence as a reference to limit the chance of the piece getting bound between the leg and the fence itself and ultimately causing a kickback, but I didn't. Make sure you do what you're most comfortable with. By overcutting the shoulder just a little bit, we'll give it a nice groove for any glue squeeze out to go into during the glue up phase. As for the mortise, I removed the bulk of the material with a large Forstner bit. I let my bit set out to a buddy. I only had this very large one, which I would have preferred slightly smaller to make life easier. It was a bit messy, and I ended up coming back with a 3/8 drill bit to help remove some more of the waste. Then it's a lot of chiseling and sneaking up on the final fit. Considering I don't do this very often at all, the base came together not too bad. Definitely some room for improvement, but I'll continue to incorporate this in future projects. Now for the top. It's more of the same, but this time I'll do the cleanup with a router. Clamping a board as a fence for a reference will make it easy in a few passes to clean up both sides of the mortise. I'm using this 2-part wood filler to fill some voids, cracks, and all the knots. All you have to do is mix equal parts of A and B and mix it around for 30 seconds and smear it onto your project. It dries fairly quick and the excess sands off super easy. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the sanding for hours, but know that I did work through all the grits, starting at 80, 100, 120, and a final of 150, and then gave the edges a quick round over with the router. For a finish, I went with a Waterlocks product as I had a bunch left over from my dining table build. First, I needed to wipe on 2 coats of a tung oil sealer since it's the fur top, and that's what I was recommended. Simply wipe it on, let it sit for a bit, wipe off the excess. Built these 2 little legs so I could flip the top and finish both sides at the same time. For the legs, I stained them with Minwax dark walnut to match a bunch of other furniture inside my house. I did assemble the legs off camera, but here they are post glue up. I used this scrap piece of MDF as a spacer to ensure the tenons will fit into the tabletop. Hopefully this doesn't come back to bite me at the final end. For the second part of the top finish, I'm using a paint pad to apply 3 coats of finish, waiting 24 hours between each coat and giving it a light sand with 320 grit between all coats. I didn't use a paint pad last time when using this product. I must say it makes the application process much easier and faster. By chance, I let the finish cure for over a week while I was helping my future brother-in-law frame out his shop. So now it's time to see if the legs will fit or not. This is raw footage of me just going for it, and with a little persuasion, I think it will fit just fine. So I added some glue to the mortises, grabbed a rubber mallet, and that's it. Time for the final reveal. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, then congratulations. I hope you have enjoyed the ride and got some inspiration and encouragement to tackle your own reclaimed wood project. I hope to see you guys on the next video.